I was talking to someone the other day, Ange, and they were saying when they came in as a guest, they were actually quite surprised to see how legitimate it is in here, that we don't actually know the other person's guest.
I know I've heard that a few times as well, and it is absolutely 100% the truth. Hey, I'm Ange.
And I'm Beck.
And we are the Gold Diggers, because we believe there's gold found in everyone.
Everyone is unique, interesting and exciting, with a great story to share.
And we aim to find it.
The question is, can we rise to the challenge and strike gold?
I need you're my sugar.
So welcome back. We are here with our last show for the year. What a year it has been, Ange.
It has. Quite an incredible year as we look back and reflect over all the different guests we've had. Wow, it's been incredible.
We've had some amazing guests on our show this year, and it's really grown. We're still here, and we're better than ever.
Yeah.
So,
in fact, I read the other day that 84% of listeners joined us this year, which I think is an amazing statistic.
yes. Yeah, and it's been great also getting a lot of feedback from people as well, which has been really encouraging. I was talking to someone the other day, Ange, and they were saying when they came in as a guest, they were actually quite surprised to see how legitimate it is in here, that we don't actually know the other person's guest.
I know I've heard that a few times as well, and it is absolutely 100% the truth. You know, we don't know the guest, and it's actually quite a tense moment, isn't it? Like when you're the one interviewing and you know nothing about this person.
And those questions really are on the fly. Like, we haven't sat down and preempted what we're going to ask or anything. Yeah. It's really just a conversation that we have with someone we haven't met before and getting to know them. It's not pre-scripted. It is as raw as it comes.
Yeah. I think what the challenge with that is that you're trying to put yourself in the position of the audience, of you, the listeners, and thinking, what question would you want to be asking? Yeah. And so, you know, there's lots going on in your head at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember the one, I think it was Hayley, where you kind of had this real moment and you said, have I got someone famous and I haven't recognised you?
That was so weird, because she's giving all these cues like, I was in a band, I was touring, I met my husband who was a sound engineer, and I'm thinking, hang on, is this person famous and I haven't recognised them? Like, it's that on the spot that you could have anyone sitting in this chair, and if you don't know them, you actually don't know this wealth of experience that they've had.
So the pressure really is on, and then of course we've got the revealing of the gold moment. And I think when you're interviewing, you're so engaged in the conversation, you're thinking, what avenue can I take this, what direction can I take this, and you're thinking about all the questions you're going to ask. That it almost seems like that moment of revealing the gold just suddenly arrives and you think,
have I gathered it?
Yes, have I got what I need? Because, you know, because you really want to deliver something that's impactful for the person, because, you know, that's what we are as gold diggers. So, you know, this is not an easy job, is it, that we have?
And we really do leave the room when we leave the room, and we don't hear any of that conversation. But I think also talking about the gold, finding the gold, as we're going through the conversation, we're collecting pieces about the person, not just information, but also I think the beautiful thing about being in the same room as a person is you actually pick up on a lot of feeling from the person that you're interviewing. You get to feel their personality and what they're like and what they've been through and their emotions that have come through their experiences. So you get a bit of a fullness of who this person is, even though it's a short amount of time. We do the best we can with the amount of time we have.
And I think I'm always looking not necessarily what are the accolades or the something that somebody's done, but who is the person and the character that's been created within that. Yeah. And that to me is always the area of gold that I'm looking for. Like, what difference has it actually made to you as a person? Yeah. And sometimes that comes as a bit of a surprise for them when you reveal that, and perhaps it's something that haven't noticed about themselves. And I love that moment, and I love being able to do that.
And even when you start giving the gold, more comes out as you're saying it. It's like, actually that person is this, and you know, it's actually really fun just finding the essence of our guests and being able to deliver that at the end.
Yeah.
Even though there's a bit of pressure there.
Yeah. So which is the podcast this year that you think perhaps you've really enjoyed interviewing that person?
Oh, I've got to say probably the highlight for me was Grandma. That was really special. And it was also very special for our extended family to hear that one. And we had a lot of feedback come back from cousins and aunties and uncles, widely spread kind of thing. And it's something that our family will hold special because we have this recording of Grandma. So that was a great
one for you.
What about you, Ange?
Oh, there's so many. I didn't have particularly family members here. Oh no, we had the husbands.
Yeah,
so that was a funny.
good one.
That was a funny episode.
It was also quite emotional as well, wasn't it? We got a bit deep.
Tony got teary.
Yeah. we got a bit deep as well with those discussions. That was nice.
That was, and it's good to hear from them. I think probably the one that maybe has impacted me the most, or that really stands out in my mind, is Dr. Colin Dix. I just loved what he said because he wrote a book and he was your guest, so I got to interview him, Death, Dying and Donuts. And it was really about planning and preparing for that season in life when, death becomes us all. And so don't just kind of let that moment arrive, particularly because he's an oncology doctor, particularly if you know that, it's imminent. The importance of actually planning and preparing that time in your life. And that's for all of us, isn't it?
Yeah, having those tools ready so that even if it's a long way off, it's not going to be a complete surprise when that time arrives. That you've already got the set of tools that you're going to need for that season in life.
Yeah, so and it's like any other season in life. We talk a lot about sort of transitioning seasons in our life and preparing for them and the things you need to do around them. Well, that's just another one of those transition moments in life.
Yeah.
And so we need to treat it in the same way. So I think that one really kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like you say, with every season in life, it's great to listen to people's experiences who have been through certain things. And I think for all of us, listening to each other, we don't know what's coming up next year. We don't know what's coming up in 5 years. So if you've already listened to other people's experiences, that one day you might go through something like that, and then you can draw from these podcasts and people's stories and go, oh, I remember someone else went through something like that. And you can actually draw from their skill set of how they got through that and survive. Because I was talking to someone the other day about how resilient people actually are. I think we were talking to a guest about, she'd been living in Saudi Arabia and she survived living in a war-torn place. And here in Australia, we think of, oh, gee, how would we survive if there was war here? And it's like, to hear someone's story who survives living in that place, then we all know we could survive something like that.
That's right.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's actually Kim's story, whose episode is yet to be released. She comes out in a couple of weeks. So check her story out because that's fascinating.
Yes.
But that's a 2024 one.
Yes.
So for 2023... I'm actually thinking back because you said to me one day, can you please stop bringing sports people in? I struggle to interview sports people. Sports and fitness.
They're always really interesting. And I always enjoy them once we're there. But when I'm presented with it, I'm like,
oh, here we go again.
I don't know the world of sports.
Well, we're learning.
Yes, that's true.
But we have had quite a few, actually, of those this year.
Yeah.
Some that have lost lots of weight, some that have done amazing achievements. Bodybuilding. We've had swimmers in, triathletes.
Yes.
Marathon runners.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
I know. It really is. But I never it never ceases to amaze me what people can achieve.
Yes.
And it's always people that have, maybe they've had some kind of physical ailment or they've had all things stacked against them, but they really overcome a lot in order to achieve these goals. And I've just been so inspired by a lot of our guests this year.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is state of mind as well. Like we can survive a lot if we have the right state of mind and if we have hope and if we can see beyond the trial and see ourselves coming out of a trial, which is what I love about hearing people's stories of how they have come through these things.
Yeah.
And it's like,
that
gives
kind of
hope to
reminds me
everyone.
of Evelyn Parsons'
Yes.
story. So her episode, do we need to give episode number?
I've got it here. Evelyn is 69.
Okay.
That kind of reminds me.
Yeah. So that kind of reminds me of Evelyn Parsons' story. She was episode 69, and she talked about this time in her young life where I think she just got her P's, and she was driving with her best friend in the car, and unfortunately had an accident. I'd not seen somebody when she was turning right. The car ploughed straight into the passenger side of the car, flipped the car. Next thing she remembers, she wakes up in hospital and to find out that her friend had passed away. And how the community really kind of shunned her at that time, really blamed her. And it resulted in her having to move locations completely.
Yeah.
But listening to her now, and she has such a positive mindset about life and is embracing life and she can you can really take these negative experiences in life, and you can go one of two ways. You can either let it break you and hold you back, or you can say, no, I've been given a second chance at life.
Yeah. Because you wouldn't know that she's been through that just talking to her now.
No, not at all.
She's overcome it and she's thriving.
Yeah, so that what you were saying before just kind of reminded me of her, and she's a representative of many of our guests in that respect.
That's right. I also loved listening to Roz's podcast.
Yes.
Because she is a businesswoman who came pretty much from nothing and did the hard yards with a grocery store on the Sunshine Coast, and that was hard, and they were almost bankrupt a couple of times. But now she's risen to have multiple IGAs across the Sunshine Coast, and they're outstanding. They're great, and she is one of the biggest hearted people I've ever met. Beautiful.
And what episode
person.
number was she?
Roz was number 52.
Yeah, so check out number 52, because particularly if you're a person in business, because I think there's so many keys that Roz offers in that episode. Yes. And in particular, if you're wanting to take your business from maybe a small business, a sole owner, into multiple sites and multiple staff. So she really gives great insight into the stretching and expansion of your business. She's such a successful businesswoman now, and I think what I love most about Roz is that she's actually found ways of engaging the community and allowing them
giving back to the community.
Exactly, and like allowing them the space to expand their business through her business. So with all the fresh produce and local grocers and that she's engaging.
That's amazing. Another great businesswoman we've had on the show is number 68, Jeanette Allen Hill.
Yes.
And we've had a lot of feedback about her episode. People loved that one.
Yeah.
And she talked about workplace bullying and how she set up an organisation to help those who are experiencing workplace bullying.
Yeah, she was. We probably got the most feedback, I think, from her episode, and a lot of people commented and engaged, and she's doing a great work with her Lionhearted Foundation.
That's right. It must be quite a common theme, considering the amount of feedback we've had on that one.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Also, Claire Roberts we had up recently. She we had a bit of feedback on hers, and hers was really talking about mental health and, in particular, suicides. Had multiple suicides in her family. And to me, I was so inspired by Claire because I loved the real practical advice she gave to take care of your mental health daily.
Yes.
Because it's something that she's learnt and has to manage and control. And I just love, there's so many practical things in there that I've never really heard anyone talk about before.
Yeah. That's right. And also she got to a point where she could have made that decision to allow her circumstances to crush her, or for her to rise above them, and she chose to rise above them as well.
Yeah.
And someone else who did that was also Jenny Gilpin, which is number 48. She was born as a result of rape, and never knew who her dad was, and then she was adopted out to other parents. And she could have allowed that to crush her as well, but she is now a worldwide speaker, teaching others about hope and her faith and doing remarkable
Do you know what I
things.
love about that episode? Was you think like, oh, you know, she's the daughter of a gang rape, but then the story keeps evolving. There's layers upon layers, and then she finally, you know, she's adopted into a loving family, but she finally meets her birth mother.
Yeah.
Then eventually, through a bizarre scenario, actually meets her father, her biological father, and meets that whole side of the family. And, you know, you imagine suddenly this child you never knew about appearing into the family.
Didn't he actually attend one of her speaking engagements not knowing that that was his daughter?
Yeah, well, I think what happened is she did ancestry.dna.com, and it linked her to a brother. She was living in England at the time, and it linked her to a potential brother in Australia. So she met that brother, and they worked it out somehow that he actually had been at an event that she was speaking at in Australia, where she shared her story of being a child of a gang rape. And he said that his father was actually in that event with him. His father's since passed away, so she hadn't actually met her biological father, but met the whole family. I mean, I could just, you can't even write that stuff. That's amazing to think that he would have actually heard her speaking and sharing that story. Wow. I mean, and there's many more layers to that story, and lots of, it's evolving still. Yeah. It's a really great listen, so check that one out.
And Ange, isn't it great to have Dave back?
It's so good that Dave's back. He's left us for 3 months this year to
Dave,
go off tour in Australia.
I need therapy.
He still needs therapy
from us.
You are traumatised by that, Dave.
He just needed a break from us, Ange. It's like taking my family around Australia.
Well, yeah, and so we got to hear Dave's podcast too, because when he came back, you held a crocodile this year.
I did.
The Adventures of Dave.
Yep.
And the family.
So that was a fun podcast.
And we take our hat off to you, Talia. Well done. So Dave's episode was number 73, and that is well worth a listen, because Dave's always entertaining, aren't you, Dave?
Don't ask me.
Just say, yes, I am. No.
Of course.
Of course he is.
Yeah, that's worth a listen.
Yes.
But who came up as our top podcast according to Spotify this year?
According to Spotify, our top podcast for this year.
Drum roll.
Michelle. Well done, Michelle. Our Italian events coordinator.
Yes.
She just has so many people that love her, and they all tuned in to listen to Michelle's story.
So congratulations to you. Well done. Keep tuning in. What episode number was that?
Michelle, let me just have a quick look. Number 70. It's called Celebrating
Sounds
Life's
like bingo then. Bingo, number 70.
Number 70. Celebrating Life's Special Moments with Michelle.
Yes.
So that was a great podcast.
So keep tuning in. There's so many more great podcasts to come. And here is just a selection of a few of our favourites this year.
Honey, you're my sugar.
Today it's Ange's turn to find the gold in our mystery guest, Michelle Wilson. Welcome to the show, Michelle.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. My husband was in theatre. He's an American.
Yeah.
And he was travelling the world with a theatre group. And I'm not sure if you know them. They're Stomp. So they bang on the percussion, rubbish bin lids, and they're very big-time percussionists.
You have just pricked my ears up.
Yes.
Because percussion is a big theme for
I
myself
know.
and
There's
Beck.
drumming, drumming and piano, and yes, I've heard.
I am
it,
aware
yes.
they use the
rubbish bin
lids, and yes, okay. So your husband,
so he was stage manager for Stomp and created a lot of their instruments that they perform with.
Wow!
And there was at the time when I met him, there was a show in New York, 2 shows traveling America, and 2 shows traveling Europe and the world.
Yeah.
And I met him when he came out here, and we had this whirlwind, hi-bye kind of romance. And my mum was the one who said to me, and I brought them all home to my mum because my mum is the quintessential Italian nonna. She must feed everybody. She must make everybody feel comfortable and come spend the weekend at our house.
Nice.
So I'd met Will, my husband, and I invited 4 or 5 of them to come up for the weekend and spend the weekend with my parents. Strange thing to do. But and my mum was like, oh, he's nice. And I'd come out of a 7-year very tumultuous relationship with a heroin addict.
Right.
So I'd lived 7 years of heart-wrenching life where I worked and worked. That was my corporate jobs when I worked many corporate jobs and dealing with the personal life and the corporate. I was just not happy.
That's something that you've had to kind of overcome and go through and deal with along the way. But then you've just got yourself out of that and then got your life on this track that you wanted it to go and embrace it with all your heart.
It happens when you see somebody wasting their life, and it doesn't matter how much love you give somebody, it's not enough if they haven't got it for themselves.
Was that here in Australia?
It was here in Australia, yeah.
Okay.
It's amazing you actually got out of that situation because some people can get very trapped in that because
hard.
they're so dependent on you in many ways. And
It was the hardest thing I ever did in my life.
yeah.
Ever.
How do you think that changed you? What like do you feel like you grew through that?
Oh, 1,000,000%.
Yeah.
One, it showed me that I'm resilient, that I'm not influenced by, because of course as a parent, my parents were so scared that I would fall down that avenue.
How old were you at the time?
I was 22.
Okay, early
Yeah.
20s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very young to be
Yeah.
experiencing that.
Yeah, and it was a horrible existence at the looking back.
Yeah.
But in the time, I was like, "That's fine. I got this. I know what I'm doing."
Was he
And
much older than you?
He was
or-
10 years older than me.
Did you feel trapped?
I felt like he was my bird that had a broken wing that I was trying to mend their wing
Yeah.
so he could fly again. I felt like I couldn't leave for a very long time, and I had a lot of help from friends to actually make that break. And it was about 6 or 7 months later that I met my husband.
Yeah.
And I so didn't want to be in a relationship at
And
that
you
time.
ceased all contact with him?
He's no longer with us.
Yeah.
He was he was never gonna
Survive.
no.
Yeah.
Which is part of me goes, I'm not guilty that I walked. It was hard, and I still see the visions of those farewells. But I knew that I had done all I could.
Yeah. Yeah.
Done all
absolutely.
I could, so I had no regrets. The family, his family, and I were in contact up until not long ago. Still, yeah. So yeah, it was, you do all you can, and I knew that.
It's good that you knew when that was it.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm done. I have to get out of this.
I had to.
Because it's either you're trying to pull them out, which very rarely happens, or they take you down, which is often more so the case.
That tied into my corporate world too, because I was with him when I was very corporate. So I had to be one persona at home, like dealing with that side of life, the really awful side, and then coming to board meetings where you'd have to pretend to be, you've got your shit together, but in your head you're going, is he going to live today?
Yeah.
And when I ended that was when I ended. It was the same severance. I ended my corporate life and ended that relationship. That was that chapter closed. Done. I've done that. Tick. Let's move.
So if somebody is in that situation, what keys can you give to somebody to get to that point where you can decide, okay, that's it, I'm out of this, I'm done?
When you think in 10 years' time, do I still want to be here where I am?
Yeah.
Do I still want to be doing the exact same thing? And that's all I kept saying to myself was, if I keep going, yes, I'll have an existence and I'll create a life for me. I had 2 different lives. I was the at-home life with him, and I was my work self. And neither of them were fulfilling me in any way. So I think it's up to you to go, okay, in 10 years' time, yes, no, I don't want to do this anymore.
Because there's always that sense of hope. Oh, they'll come right. They'll come right.
And
They'll
7
come
years
out
was
of this.
7 years
Yeah.
was
That's
enough
a long
time
Yeah.
that
And the timing of the breakup was perfect, wasn't it? Because then you met your husband.
I met my husband. Well, I went. That was when I started managing and started doing events,
Yeah.
and that got me my juices going again.
Yeah.
And like, there's so much more I want to do.
Yeah.
And I hadn't travelled hardly at all in that time as well, which was Yeah.
So how do you feel you grew through that?
I knew that I was a very strong person to not fall down that trap, to not feel like we had a lovely life. It was, don't get me wrong, he was he's a very well-meaning man, but couldn't help himself.
Yeah.
So by watching him not being able to help himself made me feel, when you feel really tall?
I am pretty tall, but yeah.
When you feel sometimes like you feel like you're standing straight, and sometimes you feel like you're slouching. I just remember going, I am so straight. I am just, I'm stronger than what he wants me to be. Yeah. And I have so much more to offer than just this little world that, we've now created.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing.
So I met Will. I went, he's fun. We could, I could see myself having some fun with him. And he said, come on tour. So I said, well, I'd like to, but I need to earn a living. So I decided to learn massage and travel and tour the world with them as their masseuse.
Wow.
Just so that I could be with the boy that I wanted to be with.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so we travelled for 2 years, Europe, Asia, everywhere.
You've lived a very varied and
Colourful.
Adventurous life.
Yeah.
So what are probably some of the standout experiences you've had?
I think touring is amazing because we toured with 22 people. It was like a family. So you'd have a week in every city you went to. And it was the same family. Like, we travelled together. We did everything together. We ate, slept, breathed, played, danced, performed.
You'd really bond, wouldn't you, as a group? Yeah.
And in that time, I also got the luxury of looking after the group as company manager a couple of times when the company manager would go away, which is quite unheard of because normally you're trained to do that position.
Yeah.
But because I was part of the fold and they knew I was capable, they're like, well, it's, here you go. We're going to be in Belgium next week, but the company manager can't come. Can you take over? So that, again, fed into my event planning brain.
Honey, you're my sugar.
Because we have Jenny Gilpin in the chair with us. Welcome, Jenny.
Good morning.
Welcome, Jenny.
So I did Ancestry.com because I wanted to find out why I was so tall, etc. So I discovered quite a large percentage Scandinavian. So that was the tall thing.
Yeah.
But I got more than I bargained for because I got matched on Ancestry with a brother from my father's side.
Wow.
So that identified my father.
Right.
And he's passed, but it also matched me with 6 more brothers. So in the last...
So many brothers, Jenny.
Oh my goodness,
on both sides.
I'm over-brothered. There's
So have you
12
got
brothers.
12.
Well, there's one I was brought up with. Let's work it out. One I was brought up with 4, so that's 5 brothers and 6. There's 11 brothers.
Wow.
So in the last 18 months or so, I've met 4,
Yeah.
all in Queensland. So that's been amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm actually in the middle of those latest 6. So there's 3 older brothers, 3 younger brothers.
Right.
And so all these years I thought I'd had just different heart's desires that I'd love to about these brothers. But I discovered recently that about 10 years ago I was telling my story in an event in Townsville in Queensland. And I discovered recently that my father and one of my brothers was in that meeting 10 years ago.
Oh, my goodness.
It just gets... It's actually crazier than I've told Angela, actually.
Oh, keep going.
So there's a lady I know really well in Queensland, I've known for a long time, and I mentioned the name of my real father, and she was brought up in the same town that he was.
Wow.
And she brings a photo up on her phone. She said, "Is this your father?" I went, "Yes." She said, "I was brought up next door."
No, you've never told me
No,
that
I haven't
part.
told you that one. Like, it just, it's
Wow.
really, bizarre,
Wow.
the circumstances of everything.
And how does this make you feel? Like, just suddenly you've got this whole family that...
Well, this is why I call myself Jenny from the block. because there's both sides of the tracks involved here. The tracks, whatever we call that in Australia. There's privilege, and there's another side that perhaps wasn't as privileged.
Yeah.
And so I sit somewhere in the middle.
Well balanced.
Well balanced in the middle.
And how do they take to you?
So the latest brothers?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't know I existed, did they? They only just found out I existed.
So they're more Scandinavian?
Yes, that's the Scandinavian side.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so they are, they're very, very interesting, I should say. A few have a few little run-ins with the law.
Right, yes. Yeah.
One of them said, Jen, what could I do better? And I said, well, stop hitting policemen would be a great start.
Oh, yeah. Good idea.
Good place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually really feel for them.
Yeah.
Because they never had a great relationship with their dad. He was a bit of a violent man.
Yeah.
I actually would have loved to have met him, but he's passed.
Yeah.
But I would have loved
What
to
would you have said to him?
Well, he wouldn't have even known I existed either.
Yeah.
I would have said it's okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I actually don't... He did something very wrong,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but a lot of people do really wrong stuff.
Yeah.
And I think if I'd met him, I might have set his mind at ease. You remember that wrong thing you did? Well, this is the beauty that came out of the ashes. Not saying I'm beautiful or anything, I'm just saying here's a life
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's come out of those ashes. I would have loved to have done that.
And today it's Angie's turn to find the gold in our mystery guest, Roz White. Welcome to the
Roz.
show, Roz.
Hello, ladies.
So this is why you're so well known on the Sunshine Coast, because you've obviously made all those connections with local farmers, those, with local produce. You're actually growing this region economically, and that is actually very significant for the Sunshine Coast.
So impressive, isn't it? Yeah.
And that's why I hear your name around all the time. And so I know that you're now in this role, not just covering IGAs, but you're also mentoring other people. People come to you for business advice. Before I go into what that looks like, what was that like for you? You must have had mentors or, as you said, you were expanding and you were trying to get your business structure in place. Who were the voices in your life that were helping you with that?
Multiple. And it is so important for guidance because you are on a learning journey, and we're still on a learning journey. And I think if you stop listening, you stop growing. And learning is the pivotal thing. So talking to people, mentors, people that have done it before, people with experience, it's just critically important, and will be some of the building foundations that are required to make you successful. Knowledge is power. And initially, our first two mentors, Rob and Sandy Cobb, who live here locally, we bought our very first store from them, and they helped us out financially with some vendor finance because we just didn't quite have enough money to pay the stock. They helped us pay that off over 12 months. And they provided we stepped into a new industry and knew nothing. So they taught us really everything we needed to know to run a shop in the first instance. And they've remained our dear friends, and they still are today. And they're retired, and we'll go and pick them up and take them out for lunch.
That's amazing.
And just enjoy their company. There's lots of other industry people along the way, and, attending conferences. And I know it's difficult sometimes if you have a small business where even to attend, to get out behind, the counter or out of the office to go and attend. But if you can invest that time and learn from your industry colleagues, or, learn from anywhere, whether it's an industry. I always encourage our team or anyone, read your industry publications. There's some gold embedded in there. It's stuff you need to know.
Yeah.
Attend conferences.
Yeah.
Attend local network, the Sunshine Coast Business Women's Network or whatever.
Yeah.
Join a chamber, meet local people, and you're forever learning. So, you're forever
So you
growing.
mentioned Sunshine Coast Business Women's Network, and I know that you're a significant part of that. You hold a role on the board, is that right?
I'm the immediate past president.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
which is now being very ably led by Min Swan. And I've worked with some amazing ladies alongside some incredible women. Michelle Hamer, who's been one of your guests, and lots of other incredible women. It was a terrific, wonderful experience, and I would encourage anyone to get involved.
Yeah.
Because you're surrounding yourself with like-minded people. But the Sunshine Coast as a region is very unique in that what you will find when you live here is that true sense of support and collaboration, and it's genuine and it's authentic.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that exists everywhere.
It's unique, isn't it? And I think the generosity, even like you're saying, your mentors who helped fund those initial expenses for you, that's a generous spirit, isn't it? And we have a lot of that here on the sunny coast, and it's very refreshing. It's lovely to see.
There is a great community that really want to support each other on the Sunshine Coast, and I think that's such a great thing. And I think even Sunshine Coast Business Women's Network has actually encouraged that and facilitated it, which is awesome. As you know, I've come from a family of entrepreneurs myself, and I think there comes a level, like if I think of my dad when he was young, he was just one of these scallywags that would find an opportunity out of anything and he would make it work for him, and he would be able to see the gaps in the market and he would just take the risk and go for it. And that's kind of the mentality you need to be successful in business. And so he's risen in business, become successful. But there comes a time where success is no longer the motivation, because that you just have success. It's actually how you then raise the next generation becomes the focus, and actually becomes where the fulfillment is. And I can see that you're in that season in your life now as well. So how does that look like?
I think there's a couple of things there, and I really love the way you articulated that. You see a gap in a market and then you take the risk and you go and do it.
Yeah.
That comes from just passion and being able to fulfill a sector and create change and fulfill people's aspirations and need. You get a lot of pleasure from that. If you're able to provide something magical for people to enjoy, but you've done it because you've identified that in a market, there's a market gap there, and you filled that market, and then you're providing that. It provides a lot of self-satisfaction and pleasure to see that people are enjoying it.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of change. I love my industry, and I want to contribute to my industry, and so I enjoy being an advocate to shout off the rooftops about what is different and what is incredibly insignificant are the things that we contribute to the market to make it, independent family enterprise. Why is it important? Being able to advocate for it and say, this is all the things that it does. And yes, I guess you do accumulate a lot of knowledge in 30 years of being in business. And so you do feel a responsibility maybe, but just get a lot of joy out of being able to share what you know with others, and then have that sense of fulfillment when you see their success.
Honey, you're my sugar.
Guess who's back?
It's Dave. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you, team.
How long has it been?
It's been 3 months, just over 3 months since I've seen you guys.
Wow.
I have missed you. I've missed you.
We have missed you
sincerely.
too, Dave.
Yeah, it's been.
We almost didn't recognise you.
No. So talk us through your actual trip.
Oh, right, yes. Yeah, well, we did the 15,000. So we went down south and then into Canberra and then Yass and then to Great Ocean Road, Phillips Island as well, where we saw penguins run in from the beach. And then they would kind of, like wild penguins, fairy penguins, and they'd run in from the beach and then they'd go into the bushlands. And we happened to be there in mating season, so it was quite noisy, to be honest.
You had to close your kids' eyes?
No, they just ran into the bushes, so you couldn't see anything. You just heard a lot
Didn't
of
have
noises.
to explain anything.
What noises do penguins make when they're
Grunting,
mating?
yeah, it is weird.
Come on, Dave, let's hear it.
No, I'm happy to not impersonate one, to be honest. You can imagine. Let's just say they had happy feet. And that was awesome. We went there and then Great Ocean Road and then up to a place called Halls Gap, then over to Barossa Valley, Port Augusta, and then up through the centre. Went straight up. There's this one big highway, Stewart Highway, that kind of runs from the base to the top.
Yeah, wow.
And that covers Cooper Pedy.
Yeah.
How is that? Because that would have been like hours on end looking at the same thing.
You'd think you'd get bored from it, but the country, like Australia, is amazing because it's got just the scenery is incredible because although it's bland and like you can't see anything for ages, it's still so interesting.
Yeah,
there's something about it where we're in these cities and you kind of like get used to being surrounded by stuff, but when you're out there, it feels like your mind's just free. Like you just go, oh, this is cool because you have space to think.
Was there any moments where you were kind of scared? You thought, I've not seen another car for hours. If we break down at this point, how are we ever going to get any help?
Well, we broke down 4 times on our trip.
Oh.
We had a brand new car and it failed us miserably. But we broke down 10 minutes away from where Peter Falconio died.
Oh,
was
wow.
murdered, actually. Well, allegedly murdered. I didn't tell Talia that, but we were in the middle of nowhere, no reception. We couldn't do anything. Like,
wow.
I'm not very skilled in the old mechanics department.
Yeah.
Like, the best I could probably do is go back into the caravan, do a podcast about it.
Yeah. Just talk
And
about
ask for
it.
help.
But we opened the bonnet and the coolant was spraying everywhere. It was bad news. But anyway, I was able to walk a bit of a distance and call my dad, who's a mechanic, and he helped us get back on the road. But we went in limp mode, which means the car can't go above 80, and no aircon.
Oh, no.
35-degree heat.
Oh,
3 kids in the car for 10 hours. And that was epic, yeah.
Wow.
It was like, it was, I kind of was excited by it because it's something different. Tali was a massive
You're
fan.
traumatised though, really.
A little bit. And so we're trying to keep cool with like baby wipes because it was so hot.
Oh.
And that was awesome. Cooper Pedy was one of those places. Like, have you ever been to Cooper Pedy?
No.
No, but I've heard about it. Heard lots of stories.
What have you
about it.
heard?
Like, it's just really remote. It's complete. It's almost.
So people live underground in Cooper Pedy.
Yeah, and like
because it's so hot.
I've seen a documentary of like this. There's this whole underground cave type thing.
Oh yeah,
like a hotel.
Like, people have houses underground. Like,
and this is where you ran out. You didn't have aircon.
Oh no, further on from that.
Okay.
But this is another experience where you feel a bit unsafe because like Cooper Pedy is how do I explain it? It's like a real life Flintstones.
Right, yeah.
It's so weird. Everything's rock and dirt.
So if you were driving through Cooper Pedy and everyth's underground, you could pass it and not realise. It's like, hang on, where was it?
Yeah.
You just drove over someone's lounge.
Yeah. Hey, can't park there.
We can't breathe.
It's not exactly like that because they're in mountains. Like they dig into mountains. So it's underground. It's not fully underground,
but they
yes,
must be like how.
There'd be a sign.
The community. How big's the community there?
I don't know the population, but there's a lot of people there. Yeah, a lot of Indigenous Australians and a lot of people who go there to mine opals. That's what Cooper Pedy is all about, is mining opals. There's an opal store every like 5 to 10 meters. And I was sus because, I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but I don't reckon an opal's ever been found in Cooper Pedy, right? This is controversial, right? This is controversial stuff. I think it was a town where nothing was happening there. So how do we turn this into a tourist town? Well, we tell people opals are here. And what they do is they import opals from other places and bring it in.
Throw them around.
It was so weird. There was opal stores, and there was this one opal shop. It was like a setup, like a jewelry shop, but the opals were like packed on top of each other. And the guy, like running it, was a human goat. Right?
What does that mean?
What does that
He can climb mountains,
right?
His eyes were like security cameras. They were pointing in all different directions.
Right.
And he was like standing on something and like growling at people as they came in the shop.
I've
Good
just got the
social
most
skills.
But he was just
awful
talking.
visual of this
Oh, yeah.
person.
I know. That's probably better than what he looked like.
Can you please send all your complaint lessons to Podspot?
Yeah. The
Not to the gold diggers.
The gold diggers.
We take no responsibility
It's all Dave.
to the people of Cooper PD.
Lovely man. Sometimes being called the goat is not bad. He's greatest of all time. But we couldn't understand a word he was saying. He was like, like the Tasmanian devil almost. Like it was. My kids were like, "What is he saying?" I'm like, I can't even tell you.
But then you probably realise that's how everyone communicates in Cooper PD.
I think it is a little bit. Yeah, they have their Cooperidian language.
Did you repeat to your kids? He said, "Here it around
Here it hoppity, over here, get an opal." But in all that, it was epic because
I'm never imagining him spitting out beef jerky.
he's spitting out tobacco, everything.
Was he Welsh? Because I can't understand the Welsh.
No. The Welsh language is hard. No, he had his own language.
Right.
Yeah,
Special.
Cooperidian. It was
Cooperpedian.
it was interesting. Like,
So
but all these
that's
different
like so
experiences.
far remote, isn't it? There's no township around there for.
Oh, there's a few towns near Cooperidia, but like we going from Cooperidia, then we went to a place called Erldunda, which is the point where you go, you turn left to go to Uluru.
Yeah.
And we stayed at Erldunda, which is, they call it the centre of the centre. So it's the centre of Australia. And
I can imagine if you took the wrong turn, you'd end up somewhere completely different.
Oh, you could.
Make sure you turn left.
There's a lot. I was a little worried about that, to be honest, because sometimes we didn't have reception.
Yeah.
You had no idea where you're going.
Did you
Make sure
take
the
an
signs
old-fashioned
were
map?
No.
Yeah, you
Refidex.
Why
Why would we do that?
Because you wouldn't even know or remember how to read
What
one.
is that?
A Refidex. The old Refidex.
I am old enough to remember a Refidex. We used to sit it in the boot and get it out, and you'd go L1 to L. I knew all that.
Use it as a boost.
We actually should have taken one of them because that would have helped us a little bit. But like every place you go to has pet animals like emus or crocodiles or like I don't like there's no rules or regulations around what pets you have there.
So there's no cats and dogs, no normal pets.
No, they get eaten by the crocodiles. They do.
They don't survive.
They're for a couple of days. It was an incredible time.
Angela's turn to find the gold in our mystery guest, Dr. Colin Dix. Welcome to the show, Colin.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. We know that at some point our lives, all of us, are going to come to an end. We need to be prepared for that day when our life comes to an end, but then live all the other days as if they aren't. And there's a great Peanuts and Snoopy meme where it says, one day we have to die. And he says, that's just one day. The rest of the time we get to live. And I think that's
so
the
good.
donut message, is to say, well, okay, whether our lives end in 5 years or 10 years or 150 years, imagine if we lived to 150 years.
Yeah.
At some point it ends. Let's do the best we can and be ready for that day. But what can we fill our life up with? I can think of, donuts and holidays and adventures. Let's do all of that while we can. And one of the things we get, I've seen it in my work, I've seen it in my patients, is get caught on this little hamster wheel of busyness and work and activity. And, we work, and we don't really stop to get off and say, the proverbial smell the roses, stop to smell the roses. Yeah.
We've had a previous guest here, Luke, and he has the world's rarest cancer. A sarcoma in his brain, I think it was. And he was given, I think, 12 months to live. And he was about 27 at the time. He's now 7 years post that. And he went down a very holistic kind of track.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because in interviewing him, his mentality was very different in terms of not necessarily looking to the future, but really loving and embracing today and being thankful that he's got today. And that seemed to have kept him going to the next day and the next day. And so there is this element from his story anyway of hopefulness and positivity against a really terrible diagnosis and prognosis. Yeah. So where does hope play in that journey?
Hope is essential. You need to give people hope, not false hope, not make false promises and say, look, everything's going to be great, you're going to live forever. But you've got to say, look, let's get to the next base. We can get there. We can take the next step. Let's enjoy what we're doing. And often that will to live is important. We don't understand all the aspects of health. As a doctor and a scientist, I have a view of health. The holistic and other parts are also important. There's definitely a spiritual component. There's an emotional component. There's a greater understanding of health that we don't see the full picture. But the thing for an individual is to say, how can I make the best of my day? And I think if we can get that going, that's why I picked something like a donut that's easy to achieve. We don't have to go visit the Taj Mahal or climb Mount Everest, but if there's something you enjoy in a day, cup of tea, listening to music, we can achieve that even on a bad day. We can have 2 minutes of good time, 2 minutes of own time, and really need to prepare for that and say, this is important to make my day count.
Yeah.
Because sometimes things are terrible for people. They've got medical appointments, they feel unwell, their treatments are making them unwell, they fill the eyeballs with drugs, but find time to enjoy something. Yeah.
Really, mindset is so important, isn't it, on any journey, not just a cancer journey, but any journey that we're on. Having a positive mindset in a bad circumstance really can help us through. Have you seen dramatic changes for people that have maybe been more positive towards their diagnosis?
I say to my patients, you have a choice when you have terminal diagnosis. You can either get on with living or you can get on with dying. So they have they can go down the route of everything's bad, I'm dying, and it's a downward spiral, or what can I do to keep living? The most difficult thing we have, I found, is the concept of denial, people that refuse to look and face the reality of their circumstances. Yeah. And in the medical teaching about the phases of grief is to say denial is acceptable. And I guess in a way, if people want to live in denial and pretend that death's never going to happen, in the sense for them as individuals, that's fine. But dying never affects just one person. There's always someone else involved. There's a child or a husband or a wife or a carer. It's a dyer. There's usually two people involved in this dying journey. And for the other person who's involved in the dying journey that's not dying, it's as traumatic, it's as bad, it's as awful, it's as much loss. And if you live in denial, you disregard that other person completely. You don't include them. So if I can change one thing, is to say to people, you need to move on from denial. It's fine to look away from death for a short period, but you have to face death, not just for your own sake, but for the sake of the person who's doing the journey with you.
Honey, you're my sugar.
And today it's Beck's turn to discover the gold in our special guest, Evelyn Parsons. Welcome, Evelyn.
Thanks, Angela.
Welcome to the show, Evelyn.
Thank you. Great
nice
to be
have
here.
You.
Thank you.
And so was there ever a time in your life that was like a turning point where you just went from one way that you were going and then an event happened and it changed the way perhaps you looked at things or what you were doing?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think there's probably 2 or 3 like that in my life, but there was a significant one when I was in my late teens. So I grew up in a Christian home and I've definitely had a faith in God and an understanding about who God was in my life. And but I also was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I actually was working in a local town where I lived, and I went and took one of my really close friends I worked with. We went away for the day to go do some fishing, and I was driving my brother's car, and I was like 17, and you sort of feel like you don't have a care in the world. And on the way home from that trip, we were in a major car accident, and my friend was killed.
Oh, wow.
And so I was 17 and he was 16, and he lost his life. He was the passenger. Car had direct impact on his side. I was like, the car was like folded in half, pretty much had thrown into a ditch, and I was unconscious, and it is a complete miracle I survived. And actually 5 minutes before the incident, my mum was working. She worked in a plant nursery, probably half an hour away, and she was planting, and she said that this overwhelming feeling came over her so strong that she couldn't keep working to pray for me.
Oh, wow.
And it was pretty amazing.
Wow.
And so she just said she had to drop the potting and just stood there praying.
Oh, my goodness.
And 45 minutes later, she had a call from my brother, I think, to say we need to race to the hospital. And I'd been taken by ambulance to Toowoomba Hospital, which was about 30 minutes away from where we were living in the Lockyer Valley. I sort of woke up in the ambulance and was trying to sort of put everything together. And all I remember, I remember the seconds up to the impact, and I don't remember anything from the impact, which I also believe has been an amazing grace for me, because I think that for people that is an incredibly traumatic thing. But I don't have a memory of the direct impact. But I just remember waking up in the ambulance and saying, what happened to Jason? Where is he? And they just wouldn't answer me. And that's when I knew, like, you get that feeling, but you just know that something's really wrong.
So how did that affect you straight up, learning that Jason had been killed?
So I found out in the hospital for sure, and I felt like incredibly emotional, but I was also in like a lot of pain, and I had like a lot of things happening to my body. So I didn't really find out the full story about how it all played out until a lot later. Both Jason's parents and my parents were told to come to the hospital, and they'd heard sort of through like, you know, local rural communities that someone had passed away, but neither knew who had. So it was really traumatic for both sets of parents. When my parents got to the hospital, they got taken in, and his parents were left in the waiting room, and then the police came to see them there. So it was a very difficult time. I had a collapsed lung and a broken collarbone and a cracked pelvis, and I had like lacerations over my body. Like it was just, there was a lot going on. So I spent a couple of weeks in hospital. I missed Jason's funeral. So yeah, in the short term, there was a lot of like just initial physical and emotional challenge. Mum and Dad had also lost my sister when she was 11. And so this brought up a lot of trauma for my mum and dad. Yeah. So there was just it was a pretty full on time. Like life in a moment had just shifted completely.
How did you navigate through that time? How did it develop?
So a lot of people were praying. My sister jumped on a plane. She had 4 young children, lived in Sydney, and she just jumped on a plane and came up. I think initially you're just trying to figure out what even happened and how you even feel about it. And then you're kind of a bit numb. Jason's father, stepfather and grandfather initially came to visit me in hospital and just say, like, we don't blame you. So what had happened is I'd gone through a giveaway sign. I looked both ways. I didn't see a car, and I drove through, and there was a car coming along that stretch, and he had a 100 zone, but they think he was probably going over. He looked to wave to someone in a paddock. He didn't see, when he turned back, we were right in front of him, so he didn't brake or do anything to avoid the collision. He just hit us at full speed. Oh, wow. So we were in front, like we were in his lane. We were almost across the road. We'd already crossed the one lane. We were on the other lane, so we were nearly across the road, and he just completely plowed into us. So
did he survive?
Yes.
Right.
He had a really bad shoulder injury. He was in a 4-wheel drive ute. I was in like a tiny little 2-door Gemini, and he T-boned us. So we were obviously the one that had the, like, you know, the greater impact. So the next season was really difficult because it kind of kept unfolding. So the police then wanted to interview me, and there was lots of like legal stuff. I had to get a solicitor. The police then charged me with dangerous driving causing death, which is like a manslaughter charge in a vehicle, dangerous driving causing grievous bodily harm, because of the injury to the other gentleman who hit us. So then that's kind of like makes you responsible for both.
Well, even though he hit you.
Correct. But because I crossed like him, then it makes it my situation. Yeah. The story around that intersection is that 7 people had died at that intersection in 10 years, all coming from the same direction, all having the same situation. And even though it sort of should be easy to see because it's farmland and paddocks, there's this kind of visual eye problem where there's a straight line of a crop, and if it lines up with the roof line of a car, or just the car's just below it, when you look across, you actually don't see the vehicle. And that's sort of what happened. And in fact, 18 months after our accident, another girl in the same way, coming from the same direction as me, went to the intersection, but a truck hit her and she passed away. Oh, wow. And they finally closed that road down. Right. But my court case was still proceeding. Like, there's always a lot of time in this.
What were you looking at as a conviction?
Jail.
Really?
So it's a criminal charge. So that's like a manslaughter charge. So you go to court, you have a jury, they decide like if you're guilty or not, and then what your time is.
How are you feeling at that time?
It was a very emotional time.
You were only 17,
I was 17. I turned 18 a few months later. So I was like 17 and a half. I think I turned 18 about 3 months after the accident. So I'd been driving for 9 months or something. The other thing that happened is that we lived in a little community and everyone knew him. probably more than even knew me. And I worked with him in the same business, and we were like really close friends, and we were in a small group of friends. And when people grieve, they get angry. And when they get angry, they need someone to blame. And I was a great candidate to blame. And I don't blame them for hating me. But there was this whole situation then around.
You were dealing with a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I lost was not just Jason, but I lost like that part of my life.
And your community.
I kept working at that place, but it was very difficult. I went through a really emotional time. I cried every day. I would just be like somewhere and I'd just start crying. I found it quite hard to manage my emotion. I felt like as the year went on, it got harder. I remember the anniversary being the most difficult time. And I think too, because the people I was working with, I was still working there because I'm also like committed to like, in all of that, I haven't lost that part of me that says I've committed to a job and I've got a plan in life and I've got to keep moving forward. I'm not going to just hide in my bed. So I'm not someone who's ever going to not face what's happening to me. And so I just kept showing up to work, but people wouldn't speak to me, or I'd come in a room and they'd stop talking. And on the 12-month anniversary, that whole group got together and put like a special note in the paper about him, and then they didn't tell me. And I remember just feeling really devastated, not that I just lost him, but that of the whole circumstances. My brother worked with me, and he really supported me, and he's 2 years older than me. He was an amazing comfort in that time. And my parents had lost my sister, so they understood grief. And so I learnt a lot about grief in that time, and my mum really helped me with that. That grief is like waves. Like you walk towards like a wave in the ocean and it like kind of washes over you, but then the wave passes and you can kind of keep walking forward, and that it doesn't just go away, but if you walk towards it and through it, it does get easier.
It's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, it was really... I guess Mum explained it in her way, and then the way she sort of explained it, then I translate into that way, and that's how I could picture it. You have to find a way that makes sense to you when you're grieving.
Yeah.
But also...
But didn't you have to like completely move away from that community?
Yeah, so Mum and Dad kept living there, but I found basically decided I need to make a new life and that I need to leave this behind. I think there was a point around... So it just wasn't getting any better. No. People weren't forgiving you. So, because what actually happened is that at 18 months after the accident, we went to court. I had a solicitor. I'd been through like a whole heap of like meetings and interviews and police interviews, and then we went to court, and the court was to decide to send me to trial or not. And I had an amazing solicitor, and they obviously presented like those circumstances around that intersection and the visibility of the other person, and the fact that he didn't swerve to meet us, and that his impact, like if he had, for example, braked or swerved, like it would have been a completely different scenario as well. And so she did an amazing job. The police, they'd asked the police to back down on the criminal charges and reduce it to a traffic offence, which would have meant I would have like lost my licence for a period of time and had a fine. But they said, no, we want to make an example of her, and so we're not backing down. And so we won that case. So the magistrate took their time and they came back and said, there's a shared blame. We're not sending you to trial. You're acquitted. You're free.
Well, that's an answer to prayer, isn't it, really?
Absolutely.
But how would you think that scenario's framed your life moving forward from that?
I think what happened is that it made me realise that, number one, like without God, we're nothing. Like you look at life and death in a very different way.
Yeah.
And I also realised that I tried on my own to get through the first probably 9 to 12 months, and that I actually realised that you can't fix your own heart on your own, and you can't fix things on your own, and that like God made us, he's the one who can heal us. And so in that time, I experienced the comfort of the Lord in a way that you can't describe or tell that to someone else unless they're in a really dark time of grief. But I felt like almost a physical comfort from the Lord. I used to lie in bed at night and cry, and I would feel like a physical feeling like of his arms wrapping around me. And it's like, I actually say to people that I really believe that God can actually reach inside your heart and like heal it. And only God can do that. You can't heal that by like therapy or other things. Like there's things you can do to help, but you can't heal the tear. And I believe that in that time I had to have a point though where I said, I'll let you do that, God, because he still gives us a choice, always that free will to say, like, you have to let me. And I really reached that point where I just laid it down. And I remember it happened. Someone asked to pray for me. I said, no, I'm fine. And then eventually I said, okay, pray for me. And then something broke in me and I cried for a number of hours. And I remember laying it down to the Lord. And when I woke up the next day, I felt like the guy in Pilgrim's Progress that had been walking around with the backpack. And then the backpack was gone. And I actually felt like this, like I was a new creation.
Honey, you're my sugar.
So we hope you enjoyed that. There are just so many stories that we would have loved to have also put on here today, but we're lacking in time. So go and check out our back catalogue of all our episodes.
Yes, while you're on holidays, now's your opportunity to check out the entire year. And we will be back with you next week. Happy New Year! So that's it for today's podcast. You'll find us on all the major podcast platforms. The podcasts come out every Wednesday. We'd love to hear from you on our socials, the Gold Diggers Podcast. Tell us about your story so we can find the gold in you.
Easy as pie, lemon, apple or cherry. Loving you is so very sweet, sweet, sweet. How can it be such a piece of cake? And your smile is the icing. Loving you is a poem. Honey, you're my sugar.